Hi, and welcome to Something to Talk About. I'm Linda McNamee, and for the next hour, we are going to continue our conversation that we had, yes, it's been a month, but about the situation in Syria and how we can help those who have been affected by less than stellar circumstances. And we'll get into that in a moment. But as usual, before I begin, I would like to thank the crew for this evening. We have Chris Flaherty, who is a staff member here at BCAT, and he helps make sure everything runs smoothly and helps us volunteers around here. So thank you, Chris. We have Colleen Moore, Jolie Atwood, Stephanie Floridas, and Marie Belanger. Sorry, I knew I was going to screw that up. Thanks, Marie, for coming. Please come back, even though I screwed up your last name. And I would also like to thank my husband, Paul, for staying home for Daddy Date Night. I really appreciate everybody giving up their time to come and help on the show, so thank you. We are not live this evening, so if you have a question for our wonderful guests, you can always email them, or you can email me at talk@bcattv.org. I think that's all the legal stuff that we have to take care of. And now I would like to introduce my wonderful guests for this evening. We have Nadia Alawa. It's getting late. I'm sorry, Nadia. I'm screwing up names. And Patricia O'Brien. Nice Irish lass. So thank you, ladies, for coming and helping share your story and give me something to do on my Wednesday night. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
To be here.
It's good to be here.
So we did have an earlier conversation about NuDay Syria, but if you can kind of recap us a little bit on why did you decide to establish this organization, and with all that's wrong with the world, why did you decide to specifically help Syria?
Well, the motto of NuDay Syria is one person at a time, one humanity closer. And that has been the driving force for the work we do for, within NuDay Syria for children and mothers inside Syria. Initially, it was a matter of providing one winter coat to one child, even within one family inside Syria, to a displaced family, so that that child knew that somebody cared, and the whole family would know that people on the outside care about that child. And that expanded, from doing winter coats to setting up containers, at a grassroots level, to wanting to do something that was way more focused in a more regular manner, and that's why I founded NuDay Syria.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And you founded
4
it back
years
in
later. I mean, the motto is still so strong, so true to the work that we do, that every person can make a difference, and the difference you make, it's going to count for all of us as humanity. And it brings hope, it brings love, and it's just very empowering for us here and for the people that we reach inside Syria.
And anybody can help. When I used to do, I used to work at a PBS member station, and it's like, we reach our goal one pledge at a time. So you help people one person at a time, and you bring it down to that individual level, which makes it more tangible almost.
Absolutely, and sometimes it might be that it's yourself you're helping more than the person inside Syria, because we are sitting here and a lot of us, we watch the news, we see what's happening, and we can't sleep at night. Like we can't eat, we can't do anything.
You've had a nanny cam in my house, haven't you? No.
A lot of the volunteers that reach out to me and that we speak with when we do containers or via email or over the phone or at events, or they come up when we go out to talk to people, they will be crying and they will be so happy that they found a way to help others and to make a difference, to do something that also goes a little bit against the grain maybe of US foreign policy, where they are really making a difference for those innocent human beings that they see are suffering because of what's happening in Syria. So sometimes, it's yourself that you're helping.
And we're all humans. It's
Absolutely.
not really, you get politics involved and governments involved, and everybody's all of a sudden divided. But if you actually break it down, we're all just trying to get through this, not to quote Prince, this journey called life. It's like we're here and we can help one, like you said, one person at a time. Now, in the last episode where I had you come, we talked about the containers and the donations and sending the stuffed animals and the bicycles and, clothing and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'd like to focus our conversation now on other ways you help. Now, one thing that really struck me, well, lots of things struck me when reading your website because it is really involved, but these people have been displaced, their homes have been destroyed. Breaking it down, how do you help with resources such as clean water? Because that's something everybody needs, for food, for shelter, for everything.
Yeah, there have been many issues over the years with, access to clean water, obviously, in Syria, since until recently, palms are getting bombed by the regime or the allied forces there. So people, they lose access to clean water, and that obviously affects health conditions and
Exactly,
and
because it goes into health and all that.
So NuDay Syria has been doing generators where we would, help get smaller pumps up and running.
Okay.
But then we expanded on that and really went into really physically renovating broken wells.
Okay.
So
now, is it just the wells, or is that also like the whole system?
It could be the whole system.
Okay.
So we have been renovating wells.
Okay.
And recently we did like a huge project in northern Syria where we did a well that had to be re-drilled, and it was drilled several hundred meters down into the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, even I was surprised that this is something that's possible. And then we got clean water access to 50,000 people in an area where they hadn't had that for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's something where you say, I think we're doing great work.
Yeah, 50,000 people?
Yeah. 5 years with no access to
Wow.
clean water. That's amazing. Yeah. And there are more projects we can do like that. Again, it needs funding, but the infrastructure is there. The logistics are there. People are ready, and it's just a matter of, time and getting the word out to the right sponsors, to get that going.
In addition to the wells and the generators, I mean, you still need to generate electricity. I did see on your website there was a video clip of installing solar panels. So is that...
That was something my husband actually has his own renewable energy company. So he
cool.
What he does is solar panels. And it's something all of us here, as American citizens, living in the West, of course we should care about our environment, care about the energy that we have, conserve energy and get solar panels, recycle, be smart about the choices that we make.
Okay.
So you're in a war zone, and a few years ago when we were looking into, should you guys be doing solar panels, there was a lot of concern locally and also from our side with the safety of having solar panels, on buildings where they might be so reflective that they became easier target for airstrikes.
Might as well just paint a giant bullseye,
Basically.
Well, maybe not, but...
Since then, people have said, we are all bullseyes, so, if we're going to get hit, we're going to get hit. Let's at least be able to run a medical clinic and get some medical testing done, with electricity, run computers in a school, etc. So that particular video that you saw, it was a couple of solar panels that we had left in my garage, and I snuck them out on my husband's nose, and I sent them out in a container.
Honey, look over there.
Basically. And then there they were, and our team in Syria took them and they installed them and they got electricity, and that was really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then we've repeated that, and those are just the small moments, and they're just amazing. And you're like, yeah, we want to do that. I mean, our partners in Syria, they want to keep going. They want to keep helping people. They want to expand on this. This is what they've dedicated their lives to. So it's really fun to work with people that appreciate the work they're doing and they're willing to
and
do
you
it.
actually have something to show for it too. I mean, you don't feel like the little gerbil running in the cage and getting nowhere.
Well,
you actually see.
I do sometimes.
Well, yeah.
And then I go, you know what, let me just reconnect.
Time to feed the squirrel. No.
Let me just reconnect and let me see the work we're doing. Let me remember, let me move away from the paperwork or all the emails or all the, public events. And let me look at those children's faces that we are helping. Let me remember, what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And then again, just one person that you touch and you're like, this makes it all worth it. We had one child and we were doing, a toy distribution. Our partners were doing a toy distribution, and this one child, the toy that he was getting, it had a note on it, and it said, I want this toy to go to an orphan inside Syria, and it happened to be an orphan that was right there. And then you see that connection, and you are like, we are part of this. The child receives a toy. The activists, the people all around them, they know that all these people in America, they care, and these are people in America, they know that they are not necessarily Syrian, not necessarily Muslim. They are Americans, just different kinds of human beings. They might be Jewish, they might be Hindus or Christians or any kind of American.
They're just somebody
male,
who cares.
female, and they cared about a child in Syria. And you see the smile on the child's face.
And just seeing that child get some level of normalcy back, because like you had said, they hadn't had fresh water. Some areas haven't had fresh water in years. I mean, sometimes it's their entire lives. If you have 5 or 6 year old kid.
I mean, a child like that, a 3-year-old child like that, there's a high possibility this is the first toy that they received.
Wow.
And it came from, a container was collected somewhere, in Massachusetts in this case. And that's humbling, and that's something you want to keep going.
Now, you mentioned orphans. I mean, how popular is not the right word, but how frequent are there children that have no parents?
I mean, there are many orphans in Syria. And even when, the stuff was happening in eastern Aleppo a couple of months ago, where there was extensive bombing and people had to leave, there were new numbers of orphans from that particular area, and we heard about that in the news. What NuDay Syria decided some years ago to support children being able to go to school and to help orphans in a larger scale was to set up an orphan sponsorship program.
Okay.
So what we have is we keep a very detailed database of all the orphans that are in our system.
Okay.
Their background information, their story, the contact
now, do you
information.
get their story? I mean,
this is part of our program, so this is obviously a requirement. So, where does the child, all kinds of details on the child and a little bit about their story. So what we have is, with our orphan sponsorship program, donors receive an actual profile sheet that has the child's picture and basic information and their story. And that's a unique sheet that only goes to that one donor for that particular orphan. Which means that every month you have $50 donation for this particular child so that they can attend school or be in a tutoring situation and receive food. Your $50 goes to that particular child. And that's pretty
I'm just
unique.
thinking, wow, that's a lot of paperwork.
It's a lot of work. And it took a while for me to say this is something we should expand and do, because I understood if I was going to create this kind of an orphan sponsorship program, I wanted this level of detail so that I could feel confident, as the creator of the program, that there was an actual connection and that your $50 is connected to this actual child instead of to a black hole.
Yeah.
Because I have been sponsoring different orphans over the years, and I felt that my money went to a black hole. It may or may not have gone to orphans at all, and that's not what we wanted in our organization. In addition, then once a year we send like an update on the child, which has a small video of the child. If anything happens to the child, we would know that, and we would have to obviously inform the donor. We've had instances where something has happened. We've lost a couple of orphans to shelling. They were in different areas in Syria. We've had a couple of instances where a 14-year-old girl got married early And then you have those instances where a child moves away and they're outside of your reach anymore. So
Okay.
in that case, we inform the donor. We ask them, do you want to get matched up to a different orphan, and continue the process.
Now, speaking of, orphans and losing sight, not necessarily losing sight, but moving on, how does NuDay Syria either identify the individuals to help, or how do the individuals within Syria know that NuDay Syria exists? So how do you get that connection to form a relationship?
Well, we are in different areas in Syria,
Okay.
and we are pretty well known actually inside Syria. We are so well known that we meet people here, Syrians, who will say, our family, our relatives, our friends, they know about you guys. We see your work and it's affecting us. Or they will say, do you know about this area? Do you work in this area? Can you look into, projects there?
Okay.
So when you are in an area, you have, your partners working for you, they are paid staff and they're vetted and all that. And they know their population. You have one partner that works here. This is his area. He works with the local council. He knows what's going on. He's not going to know what's going on over here, right? He knows what goes on in his area.
Okay.
And out of, say, 300 orphans, he knows the 50 orphans that are in most urgent need for help, for example. And those would be the ones that would enter our program. And once they are sponsored, you could, go further down the list and see who else needs. But there's always some people that are in more need than others.
Okay, because I keep thinking, I'm making certain assumptions because I'm living in my own little world. But, in a war zone, communication networks fail. So it's like, how do you reach those people? So there is an established network.
I mean,
Now, do you ever have to turn anybody away?
We turn people away.
Wow. Oh, that's got to be hard.
Well, it's not hard for us because we're here.
Because we're here.
It's hard for the people who are there.
Okay.
We have people who will contact us via social media and say, oh, I have a village, they need this and that. In some cases, we'll investigate and see if there is an actual need. In most cases, we don't have time to investigate all of those. But if they're very persistent, we would, investigate from different sources. And it's not always a reliable, actual call for need.
Okay.
So, in other cases, like if you have 50 orphans that I need, you might only have 30 orphans that got sponsored. Of course, you have 20 orphans that are waiting.
Okay.
That's frustrating, and that just encourages us to go into our community and say, we have these orphans, we need to get those.
You need to help.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, we were talking about clean water earlier, and in our earlier discussion, we talked about helping mothers provide their babies with formula and with milk. I'm just wondering how there is a connection between clean water and healthy eating, and it's like, can you ensure that the mothers do have not only the formula but the clean water? I mean, how does...
Well, obviously we try to make sure that in those areas where we work or where we send containers that they have water access.
Okay.
We don't go to one area and we do just one thing and then water.
Do you ever have to bring water in? I mean...
Well, they do bring water in and they have to pay for it, and then we would be paying for that water, it gets trucked in or something like that in some cases. And that's part of what we want to help the mothers with, that they can give their children, clean water and obviously, infant formula that's clean. But in Syria in general, talking about infant formula, infant milk, there's such a lack of access to infant milk, especially, for example, in besieged areas. Of course, in besieged areas, you don't send in containers. You would buy the milk locally and either buy it inside the besieged area or smuggle it into that area.
Okay.
So in those areas, sometimes they don't have access to baby milk and they have to boil some water or just give them some cold tea or, even some water, some like grass or something, just, boiled with water or something. I mean, and that's why you're losing babies.
Okay.
And the mother has to watch that because she's so stressed. Her breast milk has, dried up. It never came in.
And if she's not eating,
Of
ideally, if
course.
she's in a besieged area.
Of course.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about the besieged areas in more detail, but back to the infant formula. I'm thinking back when my children were infants and knowing some of the other parents around, there were, some kids with allergies and some kids who were lactose intolerant. And do you encounter this at all, or do you just say?
I think at this point in time you say survival of the fittest, and that's going to sound awful. I mean, that's a luxury you cannot afford when you can barely get infant milk.
Okay.
I also think, though, referring back to our previous conversation, is that within the areas where there are displaced families and moms caring for children, moms caring for other moms, I mean, the humanity within the displaced areas and the besieged areas is a little bit survival of the fittest, but I also think that if they come across something that they don't need or that they can't use, for instance, if they do realize their baby's colicky over this kind of formula and they've been feeding that formula, that there is conversation. There is like, this is not working. They're not going to make their child suffer if they see some sort of consequence, and they'll advocate, I would imagine, for the child.
Survival
and say,
of the fittest. I meant that literally speaking, like a baby with
The
allergies
baby
would not survive.
Okay.
I mean, and it's extremely
it's a harsh
sad.
reality that
It's
we have
extremely
to.
sad.
Yeah.
But I think you've seen, and you see in the clips, that there is a network of people who are caring. I think the operation of NuDay Syria on the ground in Syria and in Turkey is just, it's more vast than I can even sometimes imagine. When Nadia starts to talk to the board about different projects, and your mind is just racing, like, how are they ensuring this? How is the orphan program working? How are they picking people? How are we making sure that person is getting their $50 worth of school supplies and food over the course of the month? That the network is amazing there, in the care, I think, again, is amazing. And so they're taking care of each other.
Yeah.
So then, I know that your kid needs new shoes or new sneakers, and if I get sometimes the bags get really sorted out and handed out in a very organized way. Sometimes you might get something that you don't necessarily need. You're going to know somebody who needs that, and they're going to pass that along. And I think that probably the same is true for formula. When formula gets dropped off at my house, and you're right, you get the range, you get the stuff that's hypo whatever, and all of the different kinds of formulas. And so I think if they realize their baby isn't taking to something, they'll pass that along and say, I need to find this thing.
Okay.
So, I think that it's an important point to remember that within those areas, they are helping each other survive
A
it.
funny thing from Syria also, pre-war time, is that neighbors and friends, they would, breastfeed each other's babies. So there is like a special,
Syria is unique, I think.
So there is like this community, and that we have seen the effects of that now, for example, with orphans, where if if a neighbor saw that their neighbors, that everybody had died and there was a surviving child or infant, they take that child in like their own. And some of the orphans that we have, they're being taken care of, by neighbors and friends. They're not relatives at all. And they will look out for that child as if it were their own.
Wow.
That's very incredible. You don't have food and you're taking in another child or children because, they feel like your own family and you won't let them not be with you.
Wow.
And it's from the culture. It's not from the circumstance.
Okay.
Right. Because it's in them.
Right.
Whereas
I was still thinking it would be a little of both, but I mean, again, because I'm in my own little, Burlington bubble.
Well, I think we look at situations here, and I always, there's, situations where there are places that there's a hurricane and there's no water and people are lining up, but everybody's taking as much as they can, right, here.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know where it's
don't know, and so, so that's why I view it as a mostly a cultural
Definitely
thing.
a cultural.
That they,
Okay.
that they're
But
able
again,
to
I
do
don't
that.
know
And
that
I
we
think
know
the circumstantial.
what we would do when we were in a real
That's
dire
true.
we
situation.
don't.
We don't.
We don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
None of us know
Yeah.
what we would do.
Yeah.
I used to think, I have 8 children, and I remember several years ago I was driving on the highway and, there's an accident or somebody needs help. And I was driving and I was thinking, I'm absolutely not going to stop. I mean, it sounds weird. I'm absolutely not going to stop the car because I'm a mother, I have my children, my life is extremely valuable, and I'm not going to put myself in danger to help somebody else.
Right.
And that's, I was...
That's
I
our
really
mentality.
I really, really felt that. And then when things started happening in Syria and when I started really watching and seeing what was happening, I had a huge shift happen inside of me where I felt like my children are not worth more than those children. I understand I'm the mother of my children.
Yeah.
But there's just like, I have to do something. I have to put myself out there and do something for these other children. So even though it's not to the full comfort or, convenience of me or of my life, and everything changed when I had
It's a little
that shift.
inconvenience for me, but it's a huge benefit to them.
Yeah, and
yeah.
and also for my children to know how other children, are suffering, and it could have been them.
Yeah.
So my children, they have suffered a lot in terms of not having their mother around, or I'm sitting there but I'm not there because I'm, involved with tens of thousands of other children. But at the same time, what has happened over the past years is that they will bring me tea and they'll, hold my hand and they'll put me to bed, and it feels good for them. They are part of the process, like we are family and we are fine and we do a lot of things together. And they are sharing their mother and, sharing her with other children by supporting her emotionally in that way, and that way they feel, I will tell them, for example, because, you gave me that cup of tea, I did this fundraiser, I raised funds, and look at these children, what you did, right?
And you helped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something. And I think maybe we can't afford to live in our own bubble. Maybe we need to be a little bit out there. We are, all of us here, we are mothers and we have to take care of our children.
Yeah, you
But
have to reach out of your comfort zone.
But still, you have so much more resources inside of you that you thought that you had, even emotionally.
Okay.
That you can go out there, you can do a little bit more. You shouldn't do everything, but there's a lot you can do. And maybe the world needs us now to go a little bit outside of that comfort zone and that bubble and reach out a little bit more.
Now, I do want to show, we talked about some of the besieged areas and some of the help that you're providing. I do want to check out one of the videos that we have about one of the soup kitchens. And then after we watch this video, if you could tell me a little bit more about, is this typical, is this not? And how it impacted the rest of the organization. But
Sure.
Colleen, if we could take a look at video 3, Soup Kitchen, that would be awesome. Thanks. Every time I watch one of these videos, it's just like, it's really powerful. So in that video, is that like one of the besieged, did it start out as one of the besieged areas or one of the
This
affected
video
areas?
was from eastern Aleppo, which now has been decimated completely.
Wow.
So that was, prior to that happening. So it's very sad actually to see this.
I'm sorry.
And this is the first time where we had this thing that one of our areas in that way got bombed.
Oh, okay.
So the team stepped in immediately because they've been cooking in different areas, to serve as many people as possible. So that's why it says they brought in, meals so that they could serve these people in this neighborhood because people are not moving, from place to place inside.
Okay.
But that's all gone now.
Now, it seems like, at least in that particular video, it was all children that came. I mean, are these orphans? Do they have any adult figure with them? I mean...
Most of them are going back to a mother.
Okay.
So, but many of them are
And again,
orphans.
it's like a cultural thing. It's like, here, you can't let your kids outside, and...
Could be that she's so torn apart that,
Wow. So, what...
Could also be for the, sometimes they don't show the women on the camera.
Oh, okay.
Especially in Aleppo, there's like some cultural issues with filming women.
Oh, okay.
So,
Now,
I mean,
just
it's so we
total
don't know.
tangent. Who does all these videos?
I mean, our team does,
Okay.
do them, so we don't know 100%, you didn't see all the, I mean, this is a footage of some of the distribution, right?
Oh, okay. Now, fresh vegetables, fresh food. I mean, that video seemed to have a lot of new, fresh produce. Is that normally readily available in the areas that you serve? Is it imported? Is it,
No, I mean, sometimes these would be produced at fields that were supported by NuDay Syria, for example, or they are still growing and they're bought locally.
Okay.
But they're very expensive because there's only so much water to use for that purpose, and etc. These children would not get meals if they were, this is their only meal. They're fasting, and as Muslims, they fast from sunrise to sunset, right?
Okay.
And they were getting meals distributed during the middle of the day. They're not going to be eating right now. They're fasting.
Okay.
And the distribution happened during the day because they were, like lines of people would get bombed at
you're
night
in a war
purposely.
zone. I mean, you want to be able to see what you're doing.
No, they would purposely get bombed, standing in lines,
Wow.
in the evenings when they would be out getting food. And that's why they would distribute the food during the daytime, at odd times of the day, even though people wouldn't be able to eat until evening. So they're bringing home, this, whatever, the baskets of food, the packages of food. But that might be, for a family of 4 or 5 people. It's not, for each child necessarily. They bring it back to the mother, the children,
to the family.
Still back there. So, the video is supposed to make us feel good, but the reality is a little bit harsher actually than, what it
I'm
shows.
sorry, I didn't mean to choose a bad video.
No, it's not a
It's
bad
just
video,
like-
but it just now...
It's very
it-
moving
yeah.
and
A lot of it.
motivating,
it's,
actually.
Yeah.
in terms of wanting to help.
Now, with the situation in Syria, again, pardon my ignorance, but we've mentioned bombings, but is there also ground fighting, and how does this impact, if there is, how does that impact the workers that help those that are displaced?
So, I mean, we don't work really in areas that are active war zones.
Okay.
We work in some besieged areas,
Okay.
As you saw here.
Because it
in
just
Aleppo.
seems like, it's all hell.
But the
I mean,
humanitarian, aspect of inside Syria, it's really not happening together with, the military strikes. When you get strikes like that, you're like, why did that happen? And how does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it wasn't supposed to happen, right? Because this is purely a humanitarian effort. But in terms of the work that we do, it's not happening in active fighting zones or anything like that.
Okay.
In northern Syria, in the areas in particular, there are supposedly stable, and nothing is really happening.
Okay.
And the airstrikes that have been happening in northern Syria, northern of Aleppo, really shouldn't be happening in areas where people are purely doing humanitarian work and there's nothing strategically going on. There's no harboring of any.
Okay.
I mean, there's no ISIS in the area, and some of the areas that have been bombed, people know that it's been proven there's no ISIS in those areas. There might not even be any opposition in the area. So why are they getting bombed? And that's the political question.
Yeah. Let's not get political. Okay, medical relief.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a big issue. I mean, we talked about the containers containing medical supplies. I think one of the clips, there was a child in a wheelchair, crutches. I mean, these people have their homes destroyed. They have part of them destroyed. It's a war zone, at least maybe not active, but what kind of medical services can you provide?
So we're not a medical organization, obviously.
Right.
So we have been financially supporting some hospitals.
Okay.
We have started up several clinics. We have one active clinic right now that's just expanding. It's focused on women and children and it's basic services. So we have a couple of doctors that come in, and we have active nurse staff. We had a midwife on staff. We have 3 to 4 deliveries every single day.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. We have, incubators there. But other than that, our medical equipment and supplies, and we do actual medical containers, they get distributed to area hospitals and area clinics, and not just our own facilities. So we are actively supporting a lot of medical facilities that are doing great work. And some of them do emergency care. They're specialized in emergency care. And some of them, it's more general. For very, very specialized cases, patients, they will get taken to Turkey. But there's a lot of work still to be done, and we fill a very important void with our containers.
Okay. Speaking of the void, what are some of the things that you need, or which direction would you like to head in? Because maybe there might be somebody watching that says, hey, I know someone. I mean,
we get a lot of donations of crutches, of wheelchairs, of surplus medical supplies that someone maybe received hospice care or home care and now they don't need them. Adult diapers for children, those basic things, and those fulfill a huge need there.
Darn, I've sprained my ankle so many times, and each time they give me a new pair of crutches. I wonder if I still have those somewhere.
Well, we receive a lot of those, and again, where would they go if they, didn't go to NuDay Syria? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
We have sent hundreds of thousands of crutches, I believe.
Yeah.
Commodes, and that's different.
Wheelchairs, walkers, lots of things.
With tennis balls on.
Yes.
Yeah. And
sometimes we lose a tennis ball. I'll confess.
We can get you tennis balls.
And that's different from the medical containers that we receive from another organization here that donates medical supplies to us, and sometimes that includes some equipment, or we will purchase, for example, incubators, which are in huge need inside Syria.
Okay.
So there are different things. We are not too specialized because we are not a medical organization. So we try to be broad and keep children and the mother in focus. So those are like obvious needs that we can fulfill.
Now, with the containers, you mentioned medical containers. Do you have some that go over that are just medical supplies and then some that are everything else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or do you keep it like this one is clothing and this one is toys and this one is medical? And
yeah, we have a working relationship actually with an organization out of North Andover. That's a medical organization where they take surplus stuff and surplus medical equipment. And they want, they usually sell it for other organizations in terms of for NuDay Syria, because they sympathize with our cause for women and children. We tend to usually receive everything donated. Except for specialized items. And those would be purely medical containers. And for our humanitarian aid containers, when you come to our warehouse or if you come out and you're volunteering, you're sorting and packing, you will see all the medical supplies, all the medical equipment and crutches and wheelchairs that people donate or that, you know, we pick up here and there. And sometimes we get a lot of those, and they get sent in and distributed the same way.
Okay.
Sometimes physicians who are connected with local facilities, institutions, if an operating room is being renovated, for example, they'll call because they're connected with Nadia or someone in the organization, and we go and we pick it up and we just make sure it goes. So whenever someone's aware of surplus in an institution, then and they're able to give it away, then we
It's all
work
about
with
networking.
them. Yeah.
All about
It is.
networking.
Absolutely.
Now, can we talk a little bit more about the containers? You know, we spoke earlier about the process that everything needs to go through, the paperwork, customs, getting the container overseas. Can you elaborate a little on how the stuff in that container gets distributed to those who need it the most?
Yeah, there are different ways. In eastern Aleppo, for example, we were sending containers until last summer when the roads got closed down. In that area, the way they set it up, they would set up shops, as in the people coming would get, you know, they would have their names on a list. They would check off, you know, how many in their family, how much stuff would they be allowed to get. And they would have a sense of going shopping, you know, going in and picking out the items that they wanted, for example.
Like clothing, what size you need.
Yeah, and you know, and there's several videos that show them having this experience, you know, picking shoes, picking all those things, depending on what they are supposed to take, right? Without paying anything, you know, this is a humanitarian aid effort. And of course, all people in that area, you know, no matter their background or who they are, with priority to women and children and wounded people, elderly, handicapped, they would be the ones coming in first. In other areas, they would go out to a camp community and again go through the list of, you know, who do we have on our list, who received last time, how should we distribute. So, you know, there are systems in place, and it's sometimes a little bit different from place to place how you do it. Sometimes you'll go to one of our schools and say, okay, you know, this month, you know, every month we want to give the kids something as a reward for going to school and encouragement, that sort of stuff. They get, you know, stuffed animals. Maybe they'll get a winter coat if it's winter. Maybe they'll get new shoes. So we try to, you know, make it fun and, you know, give it a purpose and give people some dignity in the process also.
Now, how do you, we may have touched upon this already, but how do you find staff overseas to help with distribution, to help work in the kitchens, to help build the buildings that you do? How do you?
I mean, there's an application process and a vetting process, and you know.
So it's like a regular job?
Pretty much, except it's very underpaid and it carries the risk of, you know, risking your life.
Wow.
Basically, and it's amazing what people will do to bring relief to other people, and it's amazing. And initially there was no pay; it was all volunteer based. Both from our end and from inside Syria, but as time went on and it had to become more sustainable and people also needed to provide for their families, and as we also became, you know, funded better, yeah, you know, now we have actual staff and it's pretty formal.
I'm just looking at some of my questions because it's like, wow, you know, it's just, my head's ready to explode. Back when we were talking about orphans, you said a lot of times neighbors take in those children. Are these children ever given the opportunity for adoption?
Do you want to?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the actual law, but there's international laws against adopting children who are in conflict situations. So maybe at some point in the future, but the you know, the birth certificates and documentation about whose child it is, who's going to give them up for adoption. I mean, this is a very, from a legal perspective, it's
I know it's really
not
complicated.
Something that's allowed under international law. And from a humanitarian perspective, I think there would be lots of consideration if time passes enough in this documentation and that process gets put into place, then all of the other cultural and humanitarian and what's best for the child questions should come into play. But right now it is not, and it's that way around the world with international law in children in conflict zones.
Wow. I understand, but part of me, it's like, oh, come on, give these kids a good, give these kids a home, give a fighting chance, a normal life.
That's why I think the orphan program is designed. It's designed to help people who do want to support them in the environment that they know and love. I mean, I think a lot of times we, as a culture, that I think we think of helping people is by taking them in.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not helping them at all.
Right.
Helping them, again, is about empowerment, giving them hope.
Giving them their lives back.
We talk about refugees. A lot of refugees, they're fleeing something they never wanted to flee. They didn't put themselves in that position.
Yeah. It's got to be hard
the goal of trying to keep people in Syria in the hopes that someday it will somehow become an easier place for them to live is the goal. They'd prefer to stay, and we want to do everything we can to support them staying there. So, your point about giving them comfort and a nice home is what we're doing. We're doing it the best way we can with help with one person at a time. I love that because it's also on this end. We're not just helping one person there. It's us, one person, you. It's, when we reach out to people and ask for donations, like, on a Sunday, 5 or 6 cars will pull up to my house. And, my son will go out and help unload, and I'll say, where'd you come from? How'd you hear about us? And they'll just, give a brief explanation, but then they'll say, my daughter did a drive at her school, or I told my neighbors, and they put this in my porch, and I'm just the person who's bringing it. I didn't bring all this. So it's every person, every action that's helping, and I think bringing the comfort to them is really the goal of the organization, is in keeping them there and as comfortable as they can be.
Now, speaking of trying to establish normalcy, we do have another video clip about tree grows, and when I first saw this clip, it looked like this was the opportunity where you actually created one of these little NuDay Syria villages with the new buildings and everything. So, Colleen, can we take a look at that clip, please? Video number 5. Can you tell me a little bit more about that community? I mean, or that soon-to-be community. Were those the buildings? How did they get there? And how do people come to live there or to be there?
So when we started this project initially, we wanted to move a whole settlement at a riverbank up the mountain ledge, basically. The project took a little bit longer just because of the situation in Syria, so instead of it taking 3 to 4 months to build, the project grew and expanded, and it took about 9 months before everything was ready. So a few things changed, with the families in the riverbank. Some left, some So the area became, for widowed women families where they would live. So each of these homes, it's like row homes, and each home has a small kitchen area, small bathroom area, and then there's a living area. Okay. When I said, I need to see plans for this project, I specifically said, we want to make sure there are windows and there's a door they can close and it has the feel of a home. Okay. And we got all of that, and it's been really amazing. So, there's another video where you see where they get a key, to their own door. And
yeah, I didn't find that video. I kind of
but some of these families, really have not had their own home for a long time, and many of them used to live in very nice homes. Mm-hmm. They were 10 times the size of this house, and so it's important for us. It is important for us to recreate the feeling of a home, which is why you see that they're planting trees and starting up vegetation, mm-hmm. so that
very colorful too.
Yeah, so the mothers also can start growing outside in front of their home. Bring in soil so that it's not this dry kind of soil, so they can get a little bit of gardening going and start sustaining themselves that way, and get busy and distracted with other things than just thinking about the loss of their past lives. So there's a lot of hope, mm-hmm. When you plant a tree and when you get to look at the green stuff around you.
Now, in a village similar to the one that we saw, whether
mm-hmm.
it's that one
Sure.
or a similar one, how many families do you generally try to build a community around?
So this is a pilot project.
Okay.
And each area is different because it's very important for us to work with the situation in each area. So we're not just replicating, this project would not be replicated exactly somewhere else.
Okay.
It really depends on what's the situation there. Is there land available? Are there abandoned homes that maybe make sense to renovate those? That sort of stuff. This area here has space for 100 families, and that was designed the way the mountain, geography, that sort of stuff, and how that made sense.
Now, I'm just kind of wondering, is it a community that used to be on the riverbank that the entire community or the neighborhood moved, or is it okay, we have people from here and people from over here, and let's form a whole new community?
So some of the families that were at the original riverbank, some of them had to leave. But the point is that they were all displaced from different areas, so they did not come from one area, basically. People, they come up to northern Syria, they come to the areas where NuDay Syria works, for example. We also work around Damascus and besieged areas, but in northern Syria, they come up to these areas, and it's different, the areas that they go to, and they get taken in by local families who themselves don't have a livelihood anymore. And now they're taking in families, and it might be that instead of them living in their own home, now they have opened it up to 4 other families, and now they're living together. That's what the people have been doing. And sometimes then there's no space, and they end up in a tent that's not really a tent, it's some flimsy plastic. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they live like that, and then it becomes winter, and maybe the child or an elderly person freezes to death, and we read about it in the news.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do? Are you going to feel sad for half an hour and move on with your life? Or are you going to think, I have some sleeping bags, I have some blankets, I can get tarp off of a ship, for example. I mean, there's something I can do. I can collect money.
Now, do you take donations in the containers of tents and sleeping bags and stuff?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've done a lot of tarps that weren't being used, plastic shrink wrap that wasn't being used for its purpose anymore, and keep it out of the landfill. It can be used, to support an existing tent, to set up a tent. It can be used inside medical facilities to keep the walls clean. You know, there are many different things you can do. And what's so amazing is that
you guys get really creative over there.
yeah, Syrians traditionally, they are
Ingenuity,
educated,
yeah.
and there's a lot of
Necessity.
good ideas happening. And you send 2 solar panels, and you get a medical clinic or a school up running with electricity, and you're like, wow. Like, I didn't have to give you instructions.
Yeah.
You saw it, you picked it up, and you documented it to us, and you showed it to us, and we're like, yeah, we want to do more of that, right?
Yeah, we can do this.
Yeah.
And the creativity here as well. The woman from Maine, Allison, is very active and very creative and very concerned about the environment. So the comment about taking shrink wrap off of a ship is real. And her husband works on the ocean, and she actually cleans the wrap. You see the big yachts.
Wow.
She takes it off the boat.
that shrink wrap, okay.
Oh, yeah, big.
And there are many other people like her. There are people
Yep.
and that go out and say, I only, what can I do? Or
Yeah.
I'm good at couponing, for example, and then they end up getting all these hygiene items, for a fraction of the price, and that's how they're contributing, for example. And others, they find other ways, and it's amazing, what people, they end up doing. It's things they didn't think that they could do. And then they see, oh, I'm making a real difference. I can watch the news, I can feel good about it, because there's sad stuff happening, but I'm still making a difference, And the same, if you don't agree, this whole humanitarian crisis in Syria happened because people went out in the streets rallying, right? Okay. And then there was such a reaction, and military and dictatorial reaction from the government. Okay. So again, when we decide as citizens here that there's something we don't agree with, or maybe we agree with something and we can rally pro or con something, and we go out in the streets, it's it's very reminds me really about what's happening inside Syria. Except here we have the freedom to do it. Yeah. And we do it, and we go home, and we don't get killed, we don't get bombed. Our names are not written down. Our social media is not, investigated. We do that in freedom. So that's something you want to appreciate and not take for granted. And the people that volunteer or donate or get involved with, efforts for Syria, they get that. They appreciate it. So.
Well, we're out of time.
Sure.
So thank you very much for coming and sharing your stories and your mission with me. And thank you for tuning in, and I hope you are encouraged to give someone else, do that whole neighborly thing, and just be a nice person. Help someone out. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you around town. Good night.